Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance,
And I'm George-Affleck.
and it is time for
UnSpun. It's my
we'll get to the
version.
Biden visit, the
Biden's coming to
president's
Canada.
first time since
I
forever.
know.
Thanks, Donald Trump. We'll get to Donald Trump too. Everybody on Trump watch.
Got to go.
But
We're going
before,
international today for sure. Yeah, we're going national, international. Bring it home eventually.
and we've got some news and notes that are very, very local. So stay tuned for those. But let's
Yes.
start with Sam Cooper, the investigative journalist.
Yes.
Watching Sam Cooper get attacked on social media right now. He better have receipts. He better have done. I'm like, have you
What?
Googled him? Like, there are people coming at him saying that he's got a political agenda. I think that is absolutely
Wow.
the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And if anybody's on social media and seeing that happen, that it's an example of why social media
He's
is
a.
broken in there.
Uh, he used to cover City Hall when I was there. And believe me, he's a tenacious reporter and uncovered a lot of great stuff when I was there in Vancouver that was troublesome to me. So certainly I appreciate it. But I guess you can see this is always a challenge when journalists are covering stuff and it's making the government in power look bad, because there's an assumption that they're doing this because it's that government in power. But it doesn't matter. It's their job is to do journalism, and
Yeah.
he's
Explain what's
uncovering
happened.
things. He did it
Yeah.
locally, he did it provincially, he did it nationally. Did the whole, the whole
Money laundering,
money laundering
fentanyl,
thing.
the Vancouver
He
model.
digs and
He's done it
digs
all.
and digs. What's what journalism is all about. If you don't like
Yeah.
it, then you don't like journalism. I don't know. Suck it. Come on, people. This is how we
Okay.
keep our democracy working.
That's what a
Good
healthy
journalists.
democracy is about. And many people now calling for a public inquiry, not a rapporteur, because of how
Really? What a
complex.
shocker.
What a shock, George. But how complex this has become as we are speaking in this moment. There could be more breaking news from Sam Cooper as we
We sort.
unpack. So let's go on a bit of a journey for people who maybe tuned in last week to Unspun
Mm,
podcast or following along at george_affleck or at Jody Vance on Twitter and seeing what we're putting out there, trying to continue to educate people on the subject matter of this because
yeah.
we're so inundated. George, what have you seen from your uniquely inside outside perspective, because you know how politics works, right? You know how back channels works, you know how
Yeah.
conversation off the record, in camera,
Mm.
blah blah blah. What do you think is happening here?
In which part of this thing? Because I mean, there's the whole spy issue, which is interesting, and spying. I have people I know who've been working in that world, and they always kind of are. Spying is they're spies. When can we trust a spy? Even our own spies? When do we? How does this work? What do we try? What is the agenda here? When you talk about agendas, I don't think about Sam. I think about CSIS. I'm not saying CSIS is intentionally trying to, but they have their whatever there is they're trying to do. It's disrupt things or uncover things. They don't do things unintentionally. So releasing that stuff about Vancouver last week and releasing all this other stuff. I mean, it's the guys in Toronto. I mean, it's like, why? What is going on here? What are they trying to prove? Certainly, what we're seeing, obviously, is tension around the world against China and certainly Russia, and this Cold War heating up. It's an oxymoron.
I love that. Well done.
This reminds me, you and I'm a bit older than you, but the 70s, the Cold War era, we remember the youth, we thought we were all going to die in a nuclear holocaust, Russia bombing us and things were kind of still tight with, stressful with China until Nixon went there in the early 70s. It's like we're going back in time here, and there's this geopolitical. I always, to me, I'm almost like, I thought we got over this thing, and the
Yeah.
way we fought wars now was economically, and it was kind of more subtle. And to play this game of invading countries and bombing, and it seems like so old fashioned to me.
So one of the things that are the compromising piece of it that is troubling for many Canadians on a number of levels, as many people point out, there are always going to be the upside down Canadian flag, F Trudeau hating
Yeah.
slice. Then there's a slice of society who don't necessarily agree with all of Trudeau's policy, but certainly are looking for some political stability, where through these last number of years, there has been at least a sign of that within SNC-Lavalin and blackface scandal and you know, the We Charity, all of that. Like there's there are people that are sort of mushy moderates, I guess, that are like, well, I'm not ready for that conservative right wing piece. But and then there's the dyed in the wool, I will always be Trudeau's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So okay, so we have that. And then the news of what Sam Cooper has recently brought to the table, that within the Liberal Party, the federal Liberal government, there are politicians, MPs, who are being targeted or manipulated or used either knowingly and willingly or unwittingly. And that is coming to light. And then there's a group, not the far right upside down flag people, but the other two segments of society are going, what are you going to do about that? And then, but then it's really, well, nothing, because we need that seat. And then it starts to become playing politics in a way that's like, okay, well, how worried do we need to be about the fact that there's a rumor that an MP had a conversation with somebody at the consulate about not releasing the two Michaels who had been wrongfully held for years, and then but it's not like, unique though, George, because at the same time just this past week there was a New York Times article written by a man who was within the US government decades ago, traveling with the US government in Iran and asking that they not release hostages in Iran until there was an election so they could use it to help the next person. Like, this is not unique.
Well, and that happened to Jimmy Carter, right? That's how he lost in 1979, because I mean, politics and geopolitical policy, like this, how they all intertwine. You get the sense that, obviously there's an election potentially coming in Canada. Latest polls show the Conservatives are actually slumping. That basically BC is, the West is the Conservatives, but no only rural West, like in Vancouver and the surroundings, it's more Liberal NDP. Ontario's a split. Quebec is Liberal. Maritime's Liberal. So it's pretty much a Liberal. Liberals would win again, or they get another minority, and NDP would probably align with them. So what does all this mean? I mean, so is this weakening the Liberals or strengthening them, or? It seems like there's too many things going on, but it's also creating hatred. We've talked about this before, racism, that there's this, just because China is doing this, it means all Chinese people. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's people
it's ridiculous.
Chinese who have been here probably, with a further history in Canada than I have.
But there are even, George, there are even people living but there are even people who have celebrated their heritage and embrace their homeland, whether they live here or live there, visit here, or whatever, doesn't matter, that disagrees vehemently with Xi Jinping. Like, it's like,
of course.
The fact that you would blame people for their, communist
say that there
dictator,
aren't spies here. Of course there are, and there are people who are infiltrating. There's certainly, that is not a surprise, and you certainly, having been in politics, you can kind of, myself, they do exist. They are trying to influence decision making. It wasn't that long ago we had a mayor in Vancouver who said very positive things about how China operates, and even the current prime minister and his dad were saying positive things about Chinese administration. You were talking about a totalitarian regime that is doing mass, genocide. It's
genocide against Uyghurs.
This is not a positive kind of a role model for governance.
It was only last year that we stopped the infrastructure being built, our tech infrastructure and our Wi-Fi and 5G network being,
considered.
That's
as okay. And now we're canceling TikTok. So it's interesting that these things go, this is that spin, that public relations impacts in a positive and negative way. So while it's, to me and to many people, it's like, and if you've worked as a spy, for example, you might say, of course there are Chinese spies, and there are people who might live right next door to you who might be a spy that you think are your friend, and they might not even be Chinese, but they might be Chinese spy. These things are possible. It's obviously not everybody. And of course it exists over there too. We do it too.
Of course.
It's part of the game. But so making policy decisions about
We call
now,
it intelligence gathering though.
that's right. That's
When
right.
we do it.
But to see that now as it impacting potential decision makings by the voters in elections is very unusual. This is the kinds of stuff of spy novels that we kind of enjoyed to watch, John le Carré, that kind of stuff, but not, I knew it existed, but, we certainly weren't making decisions on our political leaders based on their connections to the spy system that we know exists on Earth. So it's very unusual in how it's being used. And I think it still comes from all this stuff that, even like going back to Sam Cooper and the stuff he was uncovering, and this this issue, this challenge we have. It started with, Trump, but certainly Biden has heated up the negative relationship with China and with Russia, because he wants to align closer with his traditional allies, because Trump had distanced himself from that. So can you have your cake and eat it in geopolitics? Can you be friends with China and be friends with Europe and Australia and Taiwan? I thought we used to be, but now it seems like you have to choose one or the other. You can't be friends with Taiwan and China. You have to choose one. You can't be with the European Union and Russia. It seems ridiculous. No. I mean, come on, people. You ask any regular Joe on the streets of any of these countries, like you and me or anybody else, this is a cliche, but it's true. I just want to live my life. I don't want all this garbage. Can we just all get along? Why? And believe me, this is the challenge, and this is something I'm working on that I'll be announcing. I keep teasing this, but a lot of it's what I'm working on is going to be related to encouraging people to run for office and getting good people to get into politics and get excited about the concept of it. I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum, because I know for me, when I was in office and trying to encourage people to run, it was really hard. And it was really hard to be in office. And I gave my time, did my 8 years, and that's all I wanted to do, and that's fine. But I want more people to do 7-8 years in politics if they can, good people. And I think that's part of the problem, is we're getting less and less good quality people being interested in running for office, and therefore these are the people who lead us. And this is not pointing any fingers at anybody specifically, but it's hard to find great people to run for office, who even at the smallest, the local level to the highest level. And so we end up getting mediocre policy decisions, mediocre leadership, and we end up potentially where we are today with this, international crisis of politics.
Perfect segue. Let's bring it back municipally.
Yes.
Some happenings with the former mayor.
It was a bizarre day yesterday. Such a bizarre day. Okay, so I wake up in the morning, and you actually sent me this story from the NPA. The judge decided that they were going to get paid $100,000 in legal fees to Kennedy Stewart, and which is a very unusual decision. And also, by the way, I'm pretty
sure for a defamation case.
For a defamation case, NPA said all this weird stuff. He said, about what he said about them. It doesn't matter. It was all just like defamation. It's unusual that a judge would make a decision on a defamation case about politicians. It's not something, generally the rules are kind of loose, and there's been lots of versions of this about, in politics over the last several years, where you think this person should be slapped on the wrist or whatever, and they haven't been. You're like, what? And then always the argument by previous judges, well, that's politics, and there's a different kind of set of standards for politicians. This time, this judge said, nope, the NPA, you got to pay $100,000 to Kennedy Stewart for this, this defamation, even though that was about him defaming them. So it's this back and forth defamation.
So what was said? What was said?
Kennedy Stewart accused the NPA of being right wing, and having this, and a bunch of other stuff, which I don't need to say. And it was too much. It was too much. And believe me, I having been an NPA person, it was, and I know some people that were there, he went too far, but that's what you do in politics. And they said,
so the NPA threw down.
They wanted to challenge him. Court, they say, we're going to sue you, and how dare you? They failed to that. So Kennedy Stewart now went after them to get his legal fees. And the judge sided with Kennedy Stewart, $100,000 in legal fees. By the way, pretty sure that check, if it's ever written, which it probably won't be, because I'm sure they'll probably take it back. It goes to the city of Vancouver, because I'm pretty sure the city of Vancouver paid Kennedy Stewart's
Legal
legal fees.
fees.
So the taxpayer of
Right.
Vancouver now get paid for the NPA. One of the interesting things about the NPA, I don't think they've held an AGM in quite a while. That actually might compromise the boards. I don't know, unless they held one that I didn't hear about. One of the things you do in a nonprofit board is you've got to relinquish the response. The board that year. There's a word, I forget the wording, but basically they're not responsible for anything that would have happened. They get, and so you don't have to pay any lawsuits that might come up. In this case, I don't know.
Right.
We'll see. Will the board have to write a check? Where's that money going to come from? Does it bankrupt the NPA? But on that same day, within hours, another story comes out about Kennedy Stewart saying he hasn't in his party, and they hadn't paid any bills. They haven't been paying any of their bills to a bunch of suppliers during the last election campaign. And then last week they were talking about all this weird China influence stuff. It's so weird. First of all, by the way, for those of you who are ever working with politicians and are getting money from them for stuff, this is actually a policy with media, the TV, radio, print. You always get your money in advance. Do not do it. I'm sorry.
Don't bill later.
It's 100% because they get all this cash and then they spend it, but they're not particularly organized. And if they don't remember to pay the bill, and if they lose, it's really hard to get that money out of them. So always, anybody who's ever working with political people in a campaign, don't do anything until you get the money in advance. Otherwise, you will. So it's weird. You got this $100,000 settlement, and then he's not paid his bills, and they sent these, and it's just like really sad, like amounts of money, and really hurting small business, and a real bad look for Kennedy Stewart and that campaign. And I hope he pays his bills, because it's not cool. Not cool.
It's not cool. Let's pivot to south of the border. Speaking of not cool, the Trump watch of the indictment, the Stormy Daniels. Like, he's not paying his bills. He's not doing his things. There's how many indictments are on the docket now? And and then he announces that he will be arrested on Tuesday. We're recording this on Thursday. He has not been arrested yet again.
What a shocker.
Trump disinformation holds hostage every major media outlet in the United States. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to check in. Mind you, I did go to Fox News briefly to check in on the Tucker Carlsons of the world, and he had somebody on ranting about how Dr. Fauci needs to be in handcuffs and that he's the greatest fraud of all time. I spent 4 minutes watching these two just bounce back and forth against Dr. Fauci. I'm like, okay, they are definitely not talking about Trump. So over we go to CNN, where I think Caitlin Collins, the former White House bureau person, who is now an anchor on the mornings on CNN, she did all day yesterday. I think they just had Caitlin like, be ready because you're going to handle it when he's indicted. And then it didn't happen. So she was like, okay, see you tomorrow.
And then, of course, there's memes coming out that people have created using AI to create him being arrested, which was something that was done a long time ago too. This guy is slipperier than a bowl of Vaseline. I don't know.
No, he's slipperier than Slytherin house or Voldemort when he is a serpent.
Okay, nice. What's interesting? Did you see Michael Cohen, so this whole Stormy
Trump's
Daniels
lawyer? Yeah,
he paid the bill. He paid Stormy Daniels the cash. Trump never paid him.
No, so Trump wrote it off as a campaign contribution or something.
But he never got the cash. Anyways,
no,
it's like what?
Which is why I'm like, politicians, you got to make them pay up front. But okay, so when Donald Trump announced that he would be arrested on Tuesday, which he wasn't, he tried to rally his people. It's kind of like floated one of those, trial balloons? Is that what you call it? When you goes, okay, you got to get out there and protest. And then nobody did. And then, except for a group of people who looked fairly organized. They were out in front of the offices in the Southern District of New York, I guess, the courthouse, where the expectation was that the perp walk would happen. But they had a sign that's like, no one's above the law and arrest Trump and all this stuff. And they're all holding their signs. And then the GOP people on social media are like, look at these signs. They don't look very grassroots. I had such a chuckle, George, honestly. The people who have literally been outfitting middle Americans showing up at rallies with red hats and and cards that have the exact perfect branding on it
Yeah.
for Trumpism
Uh-huh.
are now like pointing the other way, like, look,
You're
that makes them
organized.
illegitimate. It's like,
Wait.
what? This is the
Signage.
upside down world. Like, at what point do you think, will we actually, in the unspun universe, ever actually pivot to this man not having the power that he seems to have over the slice? Are we seeing it shrink, or is this indictment and many more to come, probably, as it's being speculated, will it just grow him as the martyr?
He's still, his polling numbers are up. He's now ahead of the Florida governor. So DeSantis, I always get his name.
DeSantis, not
DeSantis,
Santos.
and not Santa.
Santa,
DeSantis.
DeSantis.
He's the back
Or
up
if you're
ahead of
Donald
him.
Trump, DeSanctimonious.
Yeah, DeSanctimonious, which you were saying before the show about his, DeSantis' attempt at humor. Anyways,
yeah,
I still think Trump's the one to beat, and can Biden do it? I don't see. I think he still can get the. It's only a year away. It's crazy. Like, we're looking
oh
at
my God,
a year from now, the Republicans will have their candidate pretty much in place, and it's probably going to be Trump. And even if he's arrested, he can still run for president.
Do the Secret Service go into jail with him?
That's an interesting question.
That's an Al Franken joke. Al Franken's filling in on the Daily Show. It's absolutely hilarious.
Oh, really? They should give him that show.
They should give him that show. He is so good. Yeah. So Biden is coming to Canada, meeting with Justin Trudeau. They'll probably talk about China. They'll probably talk about trade. They're going to talk about immigrants running one way or the other across the border near Montreal. Is it Roxborough Road?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's that. Many things on the agenda. What do you see happening here? Is this just a photo op, or do you think there's more?
I would say I'm betting that, I think Biden's Canada's being. I hear a lot of Canada on the media in the States these days about how, when you're pitching healthcare and you're trying to pitch the way to do things differently in America, and how they say, look at Canada. You hear that more and more lately. And I think this is part of that, to say, look, here I am in a country that's very similar to America. They have all the things that I want us to have. And they seem, including, marijuana, legalizing it, which is probably on the docket for, if Bill Maher gets his way, for sure. And probably a winning idea to get the youth vote out, which is what he needs to do as a 80-year-old man. I think he's here to show support, obviously, to help Trudeau. Maybe Biden's quite popular in Canada, to show that Trudeau is a solid leader here. Trudeau is probably going to call a snap election, maybe before summer. And
maybe before summer.
I think it'll be soon, or it'll be the fall. I can't see.
I was thinking the fall, because people will just be like checking the hell out this summer.
It's about cash and polling.
Okay.
So
a couple more things, news and notes we want to get to. So we'll circle back on the Biden visit next week here on UnSpun Podcast. But a couple things before we run out of time. The recall David-Eby thing is over. I had one of the. I'm one of his constituents, so I held up I have one of those placards that made it into my mailbox.
Yeah.
What that
one did not light it big fire under the people. This guy is approval rating is pretty high. It's high, it's higher than John Horgan's, I think, right now. There's why I think he's saying he's not going to call election, but I don't know if he waits. I don't know. It's not going to get much better than this for him. And, so I'm surprised he hasn't called one. It was something that, to get his 4 years commitment from us. I mean, and to know that he probably would kill the BC Liberals as they try to continue to fundraise and change their name. And, Kevin Falcon, no offense, is just not resonating yet. Elections are different, though. You can't underestimate Kevin Falcon. He's a good campaigner. So, but based on current polling, but
it's hard to be the official opposition on somebody who's doing some of the major,
staying on the center, middle, right?
Yeah,
the middle,
mushy,
the centrists.
Okay, one more thing that my favorite subject. Can we talk about parks for a sec?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, this was a story yesterday, and I thought it was interesting. There's a park on the west side of Vancouver, and there was a couple of tents in there, and they were removed within a few days. And so there was a story on the Global last night about see how the west side always gets better treatment than the east side, because there's all these parks that are, on the east side. But the thing is that, and I thought the chair
Strathcona and Crab Park, let's name them
the
Strathcona and
Park, which
Crab
we
Park.
can't do
So
anything
that's
about. Yeah, and Scott Simpson,
east,
who is
east of the east side.
Yeah, downtown
east of the east side,
Strathcona,
and then
Oppenheimer.
Vanier Park is right on the south end of the Burrard Street Bridge.
Yeah. But I live downtown. There's lots of tents in Stanley Park, and that's not west side or east side. But anyways, the point
I'm just giving
new,
context for people who don't live here. That's
right. So the point this person was making about, oh, see, it's a right-wing government now in Park Board. All they care about is the west side, and that's if you look at how they won every marked corner of the city. But
yes, they did.
I thought the Park Board chair, Scott Simpson, was good. He said, "Look, this is the first park we've actually dealt with as this Park Board we've seen tents, and our new policy is to get the tents out of there. Thank you very much." And all the other parks where there are current tents they were there previously from the previous administration, and they had their policy, and we have ours, and we'll continue to work at that. But it's really tough. He didn't go this far as his comments, but this is the challenge. Once they're entrenched, it's really, really hard to get them out. So you got to get them, go fast and get them out of there and say, okay, it's 7 a.m. I've seen them in downtown where they have the park rangers at 7 a.m. I've seen this recently, that they're down on the beach and they're actually standing outside the tent at 7 a.m. when I'm out for a run, and they're waiting for the guys. Okay, it's 7.
Pack it up. Yeah. I've also heard from people who were down at Spanish Banks going to watch the Northern Lights or whatever. There was something
that they were amazing. Right? Wait, they didn't exist.
But the gates were closed. It's
yes,
like,
that was me. Yes, that's right.
Although I was trying to set you up there, buddy.
I know.
But
I feel like though that was a bit. I mean, okay, but that seemed a bit extreme to me. I think.
But what if you were a camper van? Like
that's true. That's right. I know.
If you're a camper van and you're like, hey, we're just here to watch the sunset. It's like, well.
And you know how many park rangers there are for the 200 whatever parks we have?
12?
Like 14. No, that 14.
14. So, okay, there you go.
And so take 45 of the communications people at City Hall and make them park rangers.
I'm doing my taxes, so I use paper clips.
Nice. Oh.
Hey, reminder on tax time, by the way. I know it's only March 23rd, but because the last day of April is actually a Sunday, your taxes are due on the 1st of May, which is the Monday. Just so you know.
Good to know. I haven't even thought about my taxes, to be honest, yet. So
I lose sleep over them every time the
because you're a freelancer, yeah.
I just
you don't stick money in the old tax.
No, I do. I've got the money. I don't like the paperwork.
Oh yeah,
it's the paperwork that I hate.
Yeah. There's people for that.
There is truth, but I like to be a good student and deliver my things not in a shoebox. George, people can find us unspunpodcast.com.
That's right. And they can find us on Twitter.
What's your handle? You're George _Affleck. George _Affleck at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. We run our own Twitters, so we're happy to engage and conversate, be kind and gentle, but share this podcast, like and subscribe, as the young kids say. Like and subscribe, share with your friends, and hang out with us every Thursday as we try and take the spin out of the news cycle. I think my head is spinning a bit as to all the things we covered today. There's so much.
Around the world in 30 minutes.
That's right. Fastest podcast in BC politics and
longest lasting, I think, almost now. Maybe I don't even know.
I think we are
210 episodes.
We're going to tell people we are from now on. We are the longest running, but we're a podcast before podcasts were podcasts. Okay, see you later, George.
Bye.